Shall we?
All right, it's 4 o'clock. Let's call the planning commission meeting to order. Let the roll show that all commissioners are present except for Lisa Gergitz. We have one item we wanted to add to the agenda just in the discussion part, and that was regarding the EDA's request for an off-premise sign at the entrance to the business park. We have minutes from the last meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, changes, or do we have a motion to approve?
Also move.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Minutes are approved. Public hearings, we have 2 public hearings on the agenda. First one is the Peterson conditional use permit request. And this request is for the conditional use permit to use the residential property and rent it out to 3 to 8 unrelated persons on a monthly or longer basis. And we're familiar with this property. This is the home that was previously used as a vacation rental. And this is a proposal that's come back to us now as a request for a conditional use permit to do what is allowed in the zone district, but allowed only as a conditional use. Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
I do not.
You have something you want to say?
If I may,
Yep, Tyson, come on up.
Want some cake?
I don't know about that. You folks prefer me to stand or sit? It's my first time, so.
Have a seat.
Sit down, yeah, this is, yeah.
I'm Tyson Smith. I'm the new baby lawyer in town.
Ah.
I'm here speaking on behalf of the Petersons. This request is simply, let me explain the situation first. North House Folk School is looking for a place to house some employees. They reached out to the Petersons. They think it's a great spot. Greg Wright, I had hoped would be here, reached out and essentially said, well, we think there might be an issue with the city zoning ordinance because technically we'll have more than 3 people who aren't related, even though they're employees of the company, staying at the house. So let's see if the city will approve a conditional use permit. This is the newly adopted 2016 conditional use permit, which obviously amended the old boarding house's purpose. In this case, we've got is it a 5-bedroom property? 4-bedroom property? So essentially, 4 people can live there. There's an outbuilding, or I guess you could call it a separate guest house that's on the property, so it would be 5 total. I can't speak for North House. I don't know how many people they plan on having in the building, but
They said they'll start with 2, potentially have 4, but I think that the request was kind of maybe more open-ended than that.
I guess I wanted to try to copy the ordinance language as close as I could. As far as I see it, this seems to forward at least 2, if not more, goals and policies of the city comprehensive plan. Number 1, they're creating more affordable housing, which as a young lawyer in town trying to find a house, there's not a lot of it out there. And 2, it's certainly assisting a local business, which at least I have always viewed as something of a pillar of the community, and anything that Marais can do to promote the interest in North House Folk School, I think should be done. So with that, I know it's nice outside. I have nothing else.
Are there,
I just have questions, but if there's more input or?
well, I just want to make sure if there's any comments, Linda, Rusty, Steve, this is a public hearing opportunity to say anything you might want to say.
And we didn't receive any in the office prior to the meeting.
Okay.
I have talked to, excuse me, all the neighbors, and they're all for it, so they're pretty happy about it.
Okay. So let's close the public hearing portion of this meeting and then open up to the planning commission for discussion. So
Just some
If you
questions.
have a question, go
About
ahead.
this use. What's it called exactly? What do we call this use?
We call it rental to 3 to 8 unrelated persons on a monthly or longer basis.
Okay, so monthly
You
or
can
longer
tell
is
that's word for
defined.
word out of the zoning ordinance because
I
it's
mean,
so
to me, this seems like it's antiquated language that, you know, I mean, I wish we didn't have this kind of language in our ordinance, because I think it's very cumbersome to define what that might really mean. And I think there's a lot of situations where you have probably that number of people that are unrelated living in similar situations that have not gone through this process. And not that I'm thinking that they should be, but the fact that we're asking the Petersons to go through this process, I mean, I know the ordinance does state that 3 to 8 persons that are unrelated living on the same property have to have a conditional use
Yeah.
permit.
I can see what they're targeting and what they want, not
You
the
can.
Petersons, but what the ordinance is targeting.
I'm not sure what the
Yeah,
intent of
I think it's
this
different
is.
things in different towns. You know, I think in some towns it could be college housing. In other towns, it could be different things. But I think it just has the potential to be perhaps not as harmonious in a typical family neighborhood if you have gangs of people unrelated. So I don't know. You know, I
Yeah.
think there's wisdom in the language, but I don't know. Is there something in there you want to modernize?
Well, I'm just thinking that, I mean, first of all, in this request, I mean, I'm totally in support of the request and feel like this is a completely appropriate type use for this property. The question is, you know, would there be any interest in the planning commission to take a look at this language, you know, at some point in the future to decide if there's something that needs to be addressed with regard to this?
If you're enthusiastic about it, I don't have any issues with it.
Well, I think this is the first time I've heard a request of this nature.
I think it's probably the third time that we've done this since I've been here. It's always been employee housing. There was another one very close by that was granted, and just down the block below. And, yeah, what's the basis for the language? It clearly relates to employee housing in our community more than anything else in my mind.
Mhm.
I think it is trying to identify when we start to care about how many people are in a house, and also setting a limit on how many people can be in a house.
Well, I can see a limit on the numbers of people, but, you know, it seems that this issue of just being unrelated people kind of opens the door to question as to what are we really trying to regulate. You know, if it was a family of 8 people, we wouldn't think twice about it. If it's 8 people that are unrelated, we somehow want to have involvement in that decision-making. And what would be the basis for denying a request that we would have legitimate reason to deny? I don't know what that would be.
Jim, I think that goes back to years ago, when there was one house they found with so many workers living there for a city-owned business, and people were very upset about it, and I think that's how this all came about.
Well, this language is older than that. I'm sure
Yeah.
this language is original from the zoning ordinance.
I believe it was from the 1977 zoning ordinance, yeah.
So what relevance does it have anymore? That's, I think, an interesting conversation for probably
Yeah,
a
I'm not
future
gonna,
meeting.
I don't want to
Yeah.
presume what their concerns were when they originally created that language,
Yeah.
but there is sometimes a desire for some measure of conformity in the R1 zone. And so, but we have to decide, if we want to address this, is there some disconformity that we have a problem with right now? You know, that we need to tool up our language for, you know. So, I don't know.
I don't see anything that I would call out to say we would not allow this. I mean, I don't know what situation we wouldn't allow. You know, 5 people that were unrelated living in a residence together.
I suppose there is
or
the
6.
number side of it, obviously that makes sense, you know, there's a certain limit there, but.
Have we ever had a problem with employee housing with lots of young people living in the same building? It turns into a party house, noisy, disrupts the neighborhood for the neighbors. Is this a concern?
No, and certainly not any more than, say, regular residential housing.
Which can be.
I'd like to recommend that we maybe focus on this particular request at this time.
I
And then
agree.
we can address that
I was just
broader
trying to
subject.
raise a
Yeah.
point, so, I mean, we can continue on with our discussion on this,
So specifically with this one, the number of people you're looking for approval up to?
I'll let Mr. Wright speak to that in the back, but
North House would have 4 apprentices living there. Their duration of stay would be 18 months for the first 2, and then it would be for 2 years at a time.
Okay.
And then replacing every 2 years, so it'll be 4 total.
Okay.
And then there's 1 additional person on the property.
Right.
Right.
I
In
have
a
a relative
separate-
that lives in the small house.
Okay.
Denise.
Is that a year-round house, the small one?
Yes.
Okay. How's your parking there?
We have a back driveway from the back alley that my niece parks at, and then there's a small driveway in the front. So they would, most likely they would park in the front of the house
Okay.
because it's wider there. The street isn't as narrow as going up and down.
As far as off-street parking, do you know what your parking count is? I'm sorry, you got some glare right behind you. so I'm
I
trying-
would say 3
Okay.
to have it be convenient.
Okay.
I mean, it is corner lots, so they have both
They have the
sides
board.
of the street.
Just pointing out that this kind of use is sort of like a multi-unit building because you're going to have 4 to 5 separate lives going on there with different needs and different journeying around. So some consideration should be given to parking. You know, I don't know that we can do anything about what you have there, but because people are going to be using the property almost like a multi-unit building in that sense. And in that regard, when we're looking at multi-unit buildings, we tend to put a premium on parking. So do you have any room to expand a little bit for parking, or does that just really screw things up?
Well, I would have to, lock it off, put in a parking ground. I don't think it would be, I don't think the neighbors would like it, but if we could.
No, I'm not looking for anything extreme, I'm just wondering. And if no one else shares concerns about parking,
And the ordinance, this is stuck in the middle of our first 2 parking requirements. The first one is you have to have 1 parking space per unit for a 1 and 2 family dwelling. And now, are we creating more units or not? It's really hard to tell.
Yeah, are we even
For
calling it?
apartments, we actually said we want 1.5 for each apartment. Which one, if I looked at this property, I'd say there's 2 units with the house and with the separate cabin building. Which I don't know if that really relates to what we're trying to regulate here.
Yeah,
and so there's no neighborhood concern about parking up there?
I don't think so. I mean,
Well, could I
go ahead.
say something about that? I'm right across the street and also have it as, in a business use, and also have a association with this particular North House project as well. And, and we have, a number of people parking, it's daytime, basically, because nobody lives in my building. But there's pretty much room, really. I think that I thought about the parking question because it seems like a reasonable thing to bring up. And it seems okay to me, if it gets a little crowded, hopefully with customers. Then I just go park across the street, which would be like in front of yours or on the other side, or there's room.
Well, I think if you think there's room, then I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I like the idea of the project very much, actually.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, Michael? Al?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the request, and that is that up to 8
I
individuals?
think it was, at this time it was up to
5 is what they said.
5.
5,
Up to 5.
I'll second it.
That's
You already got
Oh,
it.
you already did, okay.
Third, you already, get in line. So the question I have for you, Greg, is would there be any partners or spouses that would possibly be with your instructors that might increase that number from the number of actual employees you have to an employee and possibly a spouse or a partner
Yeah.
that might,
Yeah, I'm not sure we'd create marital bliss if there was 4 partners in there.
yeah.
And, but for sure, at least, one of the 2 right now is married, and her husband's choosing to stay in the cities and work, and they're just gonna figure that out. But what if the next pair we hire, one of them's married and one of them wants to come with?
Well, we're talking about a conditional use permit that is with the property, so even though your agreement might be for a year or 2, 3 years down the line, or 4 years down the line, if something else happens, then the question is, do we want to have this come back to us, or should we be looking at approving it for the number that's allowed in the ordinance?
Is that numbers of individuals or number of households? Or
Well, unrelated persons, and so
Yeah.
now if you've got married people,
Now we get back into this issue that I've talked about, is how do we define this? We don't define it in the ordinance.
Yeah.
Well, regardless where that conversation goes,
Yeah.
I would like to see an opportunity, if we're going beyond 5 people, I'd like to see an opportunity to revisit it and see how it's impacting the neighborhood, make sure the neighbors, you, or everyone is still happy with
So
that.
if my niece has a boyfriend that decides to move in, I have to come to the city council meeting and ask permission for him to move in?
I think that's what they're trying to avoid, yeah.
I would like to
We're trying
avoid that. I would like to suggest that we allow this for up to 8 individuals.
That's what I would say,
and
yeah.
not restrict it to just what's currently happening, because we don't need to come back and revisit this.
No.
I mean,
Yeah, the ordinance says 8.
yeah.
So, are we modifying the motion to be up to 8?
Well, I'm trying to understand what the motion was, what the number was in
You
that
didn't
motion.
say
I don't
what
think it
it
was
was.
in the motion, so.
No.
To approve the request. And the request is to allow use of the property on a monthly basis for 3 to 8 unrelated individuals.
Okay. Okay, so that does.
So it's in place.
Yeah,
Okay.
we got it.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, vote aye.
Your
Aye.
Aye.
points to consider.
Or our findings, yes. Before we vote, yes, we need to make our findings. Do
Sorry.
you want to take a stab at them this time?
No,
Maybe
you-
you-
You're great at
Okay,
this.
well, I could just go through Tyson's list to, use conforms to the land use or comprehensive plan of the city. Obviously, there's a recognition of the varying types of residential uses that could exist in a residential neighborhood. This is one of those that's allowed as a conditional use permit in our ordinance, and is consistent with that. The use is compatible with the existing neighborhood. We know that already this neighborhood has a non-conforming use, commercial use across the street, and it's been used as a residence and will continue to be used as a residence like the other homes in the neighborhood. Should be compatible with those. Use would not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement in the surrounding area of uses permitted by right in the zone district. And again, the uses are residential, this is a residential use, and it's not going to impede development as such. And the location and character of the proposed use is considered to be consistent with a desirable pattern of development for the area. Worker housing is something we've talked about and tried to be supportive of, and this is something that is going to be, this property is going to be used for, consistent with the residential nature of the area. How's that?
Awesome, very well done.
Any additions? Okay. We'll vote. Now, all those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Approved and recommended for approval. This will go to the council next week and will be acted on by the council at next Wednesday's council meeting.
6:30.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Yep, thank you. Next item on the agenda is a variance request from Josh Lindstrom for a front yard setback to add a roof overhang 15 feet from the property line, which is 10 feet short of the required 25-foot setback. And we have the information regarding that request with the drawing showing the map, or the photo showing the location of that addition. Thank you.
My understanding is this property is already in place, they're just adding eaves to it.
There, no changes to the roof itself, but yeah, changing the dimensions of it, or.
But they, I was just wondering if they're changing the pitch of it though, because if the overhang is not.
Do you have a clear understanding of that?
I don't think they are. I
No,
think they're just
just
adding
fine.
eaves.
Okay.
And our ordinance says you can actually have an eave extend into a setback area, 1 inch per foot of required setback. But this, we're already 10 feet into the
Yeah.
setback, so.
I don't know how far we want to dig into this, but my feeling is this is almost zero impact. The impact was done a long time ago when the building was built, and if the eaves improve what they're doing, I have no problem.
Yeah, I don't see that.
I would agree. I mean, I think it's one of those things that it's an existing structure, they're making improvements to it, and there's
It's
no
not- it's not-
impacts to any
Yeah, it's not-
adjacent properties, or
And it's not currently controversial, there's nothing going on around there that we
there's not.
should care about, so
I will open the public hearing for anybody that would like to comment, and we do have a letter that we received, and I'll just read that into the record. It says, "My husband and I received notice of the public hearing for July 5th, where the planning commission will hear comments for the variance to the roof overhang for Josh Lindstrom. We own the property directly to the north of Mr. and Mrs. Lindstrom at 1 West 4th Street, the U.S. Forest Service property on the plat, and we'd like to offer our support for Mr. Lindstrom's home improvements. We appreciate the notice in the public hearing and will be available should you have any questions." Kim Craven.
Who?
Kim Craven. And I'll give you that letter, you can have that. With that, we will close the public hearing and open it up to planning commission discussion. Is there any?
kind of jumped the gun on that. I think I just said what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Yep, I'll fire right into that one. No, I would agree. I mean, I think one of the things it does bring up is how the setbacks sometimes don't make sense to our town. I mean, we have these in here, but we've talked about it before with other, just sort of the layout of things that we talked about, what that might, how we might change it so that it's more how our town is, rather than trying
Well,
to
it's-
say like, we're gonna have these suburban lots and we're gonna have this kind of setup.
That's right.
Just doesn't seem
Well,
like it.
especially for existing structures that were built many years ago before the zoning was put into place, and obviously anything they do would require variances, and, I mean, yes, in some instances, you don't want it to reduce maybe the setback that already exists, but you also want to recognize that making improvements to their property is something that people need to do, and when it doesn't create any impact to neighbors or, have any adverse impact of any kind, I don't think there's a reason why we should stand in the way of, those kind of improvements.
I'm just wondering if we want things to keep coming to us like that. Do you know what I mean? 'Cause it does seem like that is what happens. There are a lot of odd lots and sizes and things like that throughout town. Do we
Yeah.
still want those to keep coming up to us when they happen, when they make
Well,
those changes?
I think one of the reasons the standards are in place is, I would say, for a large degree to regulate new construction,
Okay.
where they have a little bit more flexibility. Obviously, the existing home doesn't have flexibility. They have what they have and have to work with that. And I don't know many places that we've not allowed these kind of variances.
Right, well, that would be
It's-
kind of my
it's
point.
a manageable type of improvement to the property that, just makes sense and doesn't have any adverse impacts. Maybe one or two of those a year,
And you can imagine making some wholesale changes to the zoning regulations, especially in this type of neighborhood where the lots are regularly less than 10,000 square feet, where the setbacks are regularly less than 25 feet or 10 feet. But even if you did that, you're still gonna get people who have a 40-foot lot and a house that's 3 feet from the property line or on the property line, I mean, you're still gonna get this
Yeah.
type of question asked.
Yeah.
It doesn't come up that often,
Right.
so I don't know that, you know, from a workload perspective or from a burden on the community perspective,
Yeah.
it's not a big deal, but I do think that there's room for a conversation, in particular in view of what the community visioning says and what we all know about the need for housing,
Mm-hmm.
that some of these rules could potentially kind of be an impediment to that improvement, because
Mhm.
it makes density very difficult.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was trying to drive to as well, is to say, like, you know, our town is kind of the way it is, and it's kind of nice.
Mhm.
And it might be nice to say, like, well, how could we find a way to maybe just extend that some more and not expect such large lots with the.
I mean, I suppose I suppose you could have a different set of standards for the established part of the town and other standards for areas that are relatively
Yeah, I'm
undeveloped.
just trying to-
that, you know,
An idea.
if you wanted to try to minimize, you know, the number of variances that.
And I guess that really wasn't my point. It was more to what Mike was saying, just in terms of further development and saying,
Sure.
like, you know, we do have a problem with housing, and yeah, we do have a lot of smaller homes that are close together, and seems to have worked out more or less.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe there's a way to find a way for. I know it's another discussion for another time, but I'm just.
Well, and we
Get it
see, I
out
mean, you
there.
look at the plat map of the city, and, you know, we have lots as small as 25 foot in width in town that were legitimately created platted lots, you know, many, many years ago.
Right.
Of course, you know, as people built on those, you know, some people bought more than one, you
Right.
know, and others said, well, I guess I only need 25 feet, and yeah, that was enough. And so you have homes that are built on small lots, homes that are built on larger lots, even on the same block, and
Mhm.
I mean, I think that creates a good mix of
Mhm.
homes and styles, and,
Mhm.
you know, everything isn't just cookie cutter
Yeah.
type appearance.
So if I'm following, you're talking about reducing setbacks and
Or
some of
trying to
these
find a
margins.
way. Yeah, like I'm not like.
In hopes of creating more
but-
housing.
Yeah.
And in doing it possibly with new construction. What about everything in between, you know, we have this old existing nonconformities all over the place. And in the C1 zones and the commercial zones, there's 0 side setbacks usually, 10 foot front, you know, so there's more density possible, and that's why you see it up
Mhm.
close to the highway.
Yeah.
And, but what about the spaces in between, you know, all the old existing R1 stuff
Mhm.
with the bigger setbacks, more traditional suburban setbacks
Yeah.
perhaps?
Most of that neighborhood was developed before we had a zoning ordinance.
Right, so there's
And
a
so it didn't
non-conform-
really conform with what our ordinance calls for today. It's neighborhoods, say, west of 8th Avenue, that were developed after the zoning ordinance was created, where you see more standard that the lots are 10,000 square feet. It's pretty uncommon, I think, to have an entire block with 10,000 square foot lots anywhere in the older neighborhoods of the city.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that that's really in the best interests of the community to still be requiring those size lots, you know, because of the cost of infrastructure and streets and sewer and water, and,
Yeah.
I mean, the city has a real difficulty in opening up areas, new areas of the city for development, just because the cost of doing that is so prohibitive.
Mhm.
If we reduce setback sizes, for example, we also open up another discussion of multi-unit potential, because now you have more elbow room. You know, reducing setback sizes isn't going to make bigger houses, I think, in our community per se. What we're looking for, if the goal is to reduce or to create more housing,
Mhm.
then you're looking at putting multi-units in with it. If you're reducing setbacks on a typical residential setting, with the intention of getting more housing, now you're talking about more multi-housing opportunities within there.
That's
And
one
so-
of the solutions, yeah.
Right, so, in that regard, I don't know what we're talking about in terms of zoning issues from R1 to, what, duplex, quads, things like this, or just scattered little houses.
Maybe we should
You know.
just leave a little teaser and then move on to the findings on this one.
Well, that's what I think, yeah, I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
there-
no, you
there-
did it again.
there are issues, you know, that could be considered in the future, but I think
Yeah.
move on in this request. Is there any further discussion regarding this proposal for request for the variance?
Well, you didn't tell us what color it is. So. Color. I know. Gotta conform to the neighborhood.
So,
Yeah. No. Good.
all right, is there a motion then to,
I'll make the motion.
motion has been made, is there a second?
Second.
Second, motion been made and seconded. Findings before we vote. The variance is in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance. Obviously, the home has been there for a great many years. They are gonna continue to use it as a residential property, which is, I think, the intent. The variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan, residential uses, residential neighborhood, upgrading and maintenance is something I think that is desirable as part of the comprehensive plan. The proposal seeks to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the zoning ordinance. The only difficulty is the requirement of the ordinance to require a 25-foot setback when the home was built at a 15-foot setback before zoning was created. It is reasonable to maintain and continue to use that home. The plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner. Again, the home was built before zoning went into place, and not the landowner's, he didn't create that problem. The variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. It will not. Other residences in the same vicinity have similar type setbacks and variety of styles and type of home are really what make the character of the neighborhood. So, any further comment, discussion? If not, all those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is approved and will be sent to the city council for consideration on Wednesday. The last item on the agenda is a request for conversation about an off-premise sign at the Cedar Grove Business Park. There was information that was sent out that kind of outlined what the issues were. What the suggestion is that maybe there would be a provision for amending the ordinance to allow an off-premise sign of the nature that, businesses that were located in the business park could have some identity on the Gutflint Trail. And Howard, I'll just open it up, and if you have Mary to whatever.
Well, the good news is we're occupying the business park. The bad news is we're uncovering issues. Our newest tenant, newest landowner, person in the lot is our new vet. And as they open up their business, they're realizing that they need some directional signage. And as we look at the sign ordinance, they can have a sign on the premises or on their property, which is up the road. And it kind of occurs to us that this is probably an issue that will keep going, and as we build out more and more, we probably should have some signage, on the 14 that we've got to put there at the base of the Business Park Road. So we don't know, not being the experts, don't know exactly what route to go. I thought in the night you guys wake up early and think of things. we could carve out a little piece of property that would be jointly owned by all the people up the road, but that seems a little clumsy. So
Well, one of the things that when I saw this, I really thought that what is necessary is kind of a wayfinding sign, not an advertising sign per se for the businesses that are in there, but just to direct people, to let them know that if they're looking for that particular business, it's up that road. And, we see that on the highway sometimes when you have, those
Blue signs.
blue signs that the state allows you to put out there that gives you, it's a wayfinding sign, it's directional to get to a business, and I don't think we want to see a bunch of wayfinding signs out
No,
there.
Mary's concept would be something like the Guthrie Trail signs where you've got, you
Yeah.
know, a sign
I like that.
and then
Yeah.
a bar signs that you can add to, you know, showing who's where. And-
Yeah,
and
and-
business, and we already have a sign there, the business part. And I would see that as being maybe replaced by a, more of a multi-purpose sign. You know, one of the, maybe the top would be business park, you know, call Mary.
Lots for sale.
Lots for sale.
Yeah.
And then the other signs there.
Well, too, this is a hospital, animal hospital, and it's an asset to the community,
Right.
to people to find it if they're,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have a towing service up there. It might be helpful for people that have their cars, you know,
Yeah.
to find a place, so.
Well, I think most people are gonna be able to find these businesses, whether or not we allow a sign up there, just because of the way technology allows people to find businesses these days. This is more of a universal need for any business to wanna put their shingle out, and, you know, reasonable universal need to do that. The problem here is one of scale, of course. If there were 6 businesses, it's pretty easy for us to figure out a nice, reasonable way to do it. When there's 30, that's a different story. You know, 30 of those blue signs take a lot of real estate. 30 signs even using the Gunflint Trail ladder formation would take 2 miles, right? The way they did it.
Do you have any suggestions for that?
I would love to come back here with a request for 30 signs. Right now, it's gonna be a few, you know.
But we have to amend our ordinance to allow this at all. And so we have to amend our ordinance in a way that we don't have to amend it every 2 years as we sell more business park lots. We kind of have to know the end game up front. Now, the good news is, this is the only place that's zoned the way that it is in town. And so we can deal with this in the zoning ordinance with one piece of language in the zoning, in the sign ordinance section that says, for the BDA, this type of sign is allowed, or no permit is required for whatever, and it won't be relevant to anywhere else in town. That's the good news. We can just do it here. But we should probably figure out what exactly it is we want it to look like, and
Well-
then we can draw it up.
Well, yeah, I mean, do we want to get into real sign design here? Is that what we're talking about, or?
Well, if
are we
you
talking
had
about
some
overall
feedback
dimensions?
about, like what sort of dimensions or impact or look would you be willing to allow,
Yeah.
and then let some people think about sign design, and then come back with some language and some ideas.
Do we have, okay, we have these Gunflint Trail signs, we've referenced those as an
Yeah.
example, we've referenced these blue signs. Is there something we don't want to look like? You know, do we not want to look like a typical strip mall sign, which will have a million different things on it? Lots of colors.
well, you have the Baptist church with a great big sign right across the
Yeah.
road from it.
That's on their own property.
I know that.
Yeah. Right.
And, you know, the
But it's
Gunflint
still
Tra-
there,
Right.
Yeah,
and nobody's complained about it.
Right.
I don't think that would be a problem. You know, the Gunflint Trail signs, you know, they accomplish covering everybody by having one, then another a little farther, and a little, you know, that wouldn't really work on your corner. You can't really, they kind of all need to be right there. You know?
Yeah, I don't have a good, I mean, part of this, just a conversation, because trying to figure out what's possible. I don't think we've gone back to our lot owners yet to any extent. I think we did get reached out and got some pricing on, for, you know, from the person that did the Gunflint Trail signs, and it's not an owner's expense. But, you know, we could have, I don't know how many they accommodate, like,
They put 6 or 7 slats
Yeah.
on each
yeah,
one
so I
of
mean, you
those.
could have
Mhm.
2, that should cover us for the next 20 years, and then maybe a third if, you know, if we get that far.
So they would kind
You
of,
could be more ambitious than that.
We could be, but, you know,
This is a geographic curve here.
realism.
you might start looking at like one of those tourist signs where there's arrows pointing every which way.
Yeah, that's what we want. Yeah, one post with a bunch of.
North Pole, this way is there, yeah.
Just spin it.
What about lighting of the sign? Has anybody discussed whether it would need to be
It's
lit?
very early on, so
Yeah.
We have not discussed it.
Okay, so that's something some people would probably get involved in.
Well, our ordinance would allow right now that you could shine a light on this sign.
Okay,
And if you wanted to have a neon or some other type of internally illuminated, it would require a special permission.
Okay.
Well, right now, the ordinance doesn't allow this type of sign, so whatever we would be changing the ordinance to allow, we could put whatever controls on that we choose as being appropriate, and, you know, I mean, I don't have any
Probably not internally illuminated, yeah.
Sure.
yeah, I mean, I don't have any preconceived ideas, but I would bet you that there's wayfinding signs, examples of wayfinding signs out there that would be easy to replicate and be appropriate for that location. I mean, you have a straight view on that site, you know, and it's a 45-mile-an-hour road.
Yeah.
You know, you don't need huge signs.
Well, they have a sign right now. I mean, what if the feedback to the EDA is that sign size is appropriate? So whatever solution you want to come up with, use that real estate and that much sign, and then we'll figure out how to,
I-
you do some design work and we'll figure out how to write the ordinance to allow.
Yeah, and I think it's the decision about the size of the individual signs that might be allowed to be placed on that, or, you know.
I think
And
this.
do you know how big that sign is now?
I don't, but I think it's 4x4.
It's bigger than
Oh,
that.
bigger than
that.
It's
Yeah.
probably
Is it like the
8 by
billboard
12
sign?
or something.
Well, I'm starting to get a sense of how you're thinking about this, so I think our next step, and we didn't know where to go, our next step would be to maybe bring this concept a little farther forward, you know, talk to our lot owners and see, you know, not every owner there may not want a sign.
Or wants to help maintain one. You know, if you're gonna be dispersing the cost and not everyone's on board, you got another issue. Because you don't really have any
There's
association.
one
do
owner
you?
that may want no parking signs, but other than that, you know.
Yeah.
everything else.
And you don't have any association there, if I recall. There's no
No.
association fee.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, it
There
would almost
could
have to
be-
be owned by the EDA, and that you'd have to charge people to put a sign on it.
Yeah, we'd have to have, you know, people contribute the cost.
There, at this time, there could be only that one occupant of the business park that is interested in
It is emergency also.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if I guess if you run into a problem and not everyone wants to do it, you can maybe ask for something. Maybe that person just asks for something. I don't
Right.
know.
I mean, my thought is that this should be clearly just wayfinding, no extraneous advertising. It's not an opportunity to
Yeah.
promote your business other than to let
To
people
let them
know
know
that
where
it
you are.
exists in
That
it,
it's there.
within the
Yeah.
business park, yeah.
And this vet, not world's best vet, then.
Yeah, yeah.
If that's,
Voted
if
best
that's the
vet.
name of his business, yeah, that's fine.
And maybe not everyone in your development needs to participate.
Yeah.
That's what
And
I'm
then they
thinking.
don't have to pay for it either,
Yeah.
or something like that. So those who want to shuttle can put it up there.
I think we have some direction, don't you think? And then we'll maybe gather more information before we.
So the process that, you know, if we're considering amending the ordinance, is that we would have to provide that language, hold a public hearing, and then take action, and then would go to the city council. The city council would have to hold.
It would be just for this one entity, right?
No.
Well,
You know,
Well,
blanket
it
it in
depends
there.
how many
Well-
want to participate.
Okay.
Yeah,
But,
And in
today-
the
But-
future,
but to say like what
yeah, yeah,
is inadequate.
Right.
I think we can.
So we're talking a couple months before this, you know,
Yeah, no, I
could get
think-
put in place, and, you know, I mean, I don't know if it's realistic that you would be able to expect that a sign would go in still this year, but if we're working on it in long-term,
Yeah,
I think that's probably
a couple
the
months.
better way to look at
Yeah,
it.
no, that's.
Is the vet up and running already?
he is opening, he's actively promoting the clinic on Facebook right now.
Okay.
I believe they're having an open house. I saw a post the other day. They've got an open house coming up. They're getting
Yeah,
ready.
it's on
And-
July,
Do you have the date, Tim? That'd be great.
I might.
It's possible that if he needs to get some kind of wayfinding up before you can get your whole idea together,
Yeah.
you know, that something temporary could go up.
I'm hoping that we can accommodate something. For me, I think this is a big deal. We've got our first owner-occupied business in the business park. And I first of all want him to be, you know, for business purposes, want them to be successful, want people to know they're there, find them, not have any issues around that. And I also want him to be an exuberantly happy tenant, so that word is spreading around the community.
Right.
What
Well,
a
I think-
great place this is to live and operate a business.
Well, I think the business park's becoming kind of a unique incubator of business.
Mhm.
It's
So
honestly,
a sense of willingness to grant some kind of a temporary signage?
See, there's no such thing
I
as
just threw that out
grant some kind of temporary.
yeah, I
signage.
looked at Mike when I said that. I'm like,
Yeah.
So,
But, I mean,
just
people-
as,
Go ahead.
the sign that the Gunflint Trail restaurants have on the Gunflint Trail, in the right of way.
I have no idea.
Well, it's there. We know that it's there.
Yeah, but it's not. It's the one that we allowed in town
Yeah,
is on a trailer,
yes, I know.
and people use that workaround regularly. If you're looking for a workaround,
So,
for temporary or for,
we don't license vehicle signage.
we can't permit anything within the right of way, so,
because it's not our right of way or
it's
whose
not,
right of
we
way?
don't have authority over that.
Okay.
So,
Mhm.
so.
We actually prohibit signs in the right of way.
Okay.
Okay.
But
But,
not
it-
vehicles.
but it's not a sign if it's on a vehicle.
Yeah.
So could that apply to them temporarily while
Well,
they're getting their sign
it would
together?
seem to me
I
a
don't
right.
think you want to get into that discussion.
Okay.
Actually,
we
it's
would-
not a problem.
We would have
Yeah.
no, take no
Yeah.
position on that,
Yeah.
Noted.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's the direction you want to go on a
Well,
temporary basis.
I think
but,
we've got good direction with that. I think, moving forward with some sign ideas, it's fair to bring some concepts for your approval. But I think I've got a sense of what you're thinking.
So if we're going to try to address this and bring it back to our next commission meeting, can we give Mike some direction to,
I don't think you can.
you can't give us,
I think
we can't give you
you're
direction?
giving us direction to come back with what we think we want, and then Mike will draft language that enables that to happen. That's what I.
I mean, yeah, is it possible that in the next 2 weeks that they can come up with a concept that we could write some draft language around and advertise for a public hearing next month?
Is that
I'm
possible? I
pretty
don't know.
skeptical.
No, I am too. I mean, I think we can move forward in it.
I mean, what I would like to see
Well, let me see if I can.
is the EDA possibly talk to some other business parks that
Yeah.
might have wayfinding signs, because
Right.
Yeah.
I suspect that they're probably out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what they look like and what kind of regulations, govern those
Right.
Yeah,
signs.
I mean, the smaller, the less impact this has, the easier it is for
Yes.
us to write simple language
Yes.
to govern it. And so if there is some small, easy sign ideas out there that other business parks have used, I'm sure we could come up with something pretty quickly.
Mhm.
If you're thinking that's like on the top of your list for the next couple of weeks, yeah, maybe we could make that work. And if you're saying schedule a public hearing as soon as we got language, that's probably all the direction that you can offer.
Well, that's what I'm suggesting, is that we need to work towards getting something concrete, and I don't know what that is yet,
Yeah.
because we don't have that information, but.
I more than anything wanted to begin to have this dialogue with you,
Yeah.
to begin to understand what is your perspective, and then determine what I need to do to work with you to satisfy the customer that we have.
Yeah.
So I think we're good on.
I think we have,
Have an
I
understanding.
don't know what will happen by your next meeting, but it's on the top of my list, because, the business park is of a concern to our organization and to the city and the county, and
Yeah,
Um,
every business, their success is our likelihood.
there, and, again, at this time, there may be only one or perhaps two that are interested in this kind of signage. The others aren't necessarily drawing customers up the road, but for
Right.
those who have any public attraction, let's help them out.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Um,
Anything else?
I do have one other question, if I may.
Sure. You may.
Surprise.
You may.
You never know. One Roof is interested in, and maybe you've had this conversation, I don't know.
No, it's time right now.
Whether there's potential to schedule a special meeting before August 2nd. They would originally have been on the agenda today for the final plot for the Nordic Star housing project, but their engineer is out of state and his presence is needed at the meeting to answer the technical questions that are gonna come up regarding stormwater and other issues. So I've been asked by Julie Petrucia at One Roof whether anytime after the 10th, which is next week, Monday, anytime between the 10th and August 2nd, if you're able to schedule a special meeting for that purpose. I
Just to
don't,
keep the timeline moving, quick, progressing steadily.
I don't really know my schedule, but I would say go ahead and schedule it if you guys want to, and I'll try and be there.
I think the week of the 17th might be an appropriate week. Then if we took action, it could be sent to the council on the 26th.
Yeah, that's
Which
what I
would,
was thinking too.
Because if we wait later, then it's gonna get kicked back into August before
Right.
council will see
Yeah.
that.
awesome, awesome, very
be-
good.
Before we get too far down the line though, Mike, have you had any conversations with their engineer about the stormwater?
I've received the plan. I haven't
Okay.
had any conversations about them, but I agree with Julie's read on it, that it'd be better to have him in the room.
Mhm.
As we expect the
I
neighbors to
haven't,
be
I
here.
don't know that they've done any sort of calculations, that they can give any sort of good, reliable information to the neighbors
Mhm.
about what they should expect based on what's being built there. What they designed was just a system of ditches that carries the water down to the road and puts it in the culverts it's currently in.
Did that plan seem to address some of the concerns that were raised by the neighbors downstream?
I doubt it. It certainly addressed some of my concerns, which was, I don't understand how you're moving water around on your site.
Mhm.
And now I think it's pretty clear how they're planning on moving water around on their site. Whether or not that's feasible, I don't know, but that's what engineers are for.
Right.
You know, if I was to imagine what the neighbors down below think about it, I would still be concerned, because
Mhm.
we're now channeling a lot of that water right into the ditch on the north side of the road, where it's got a series of culverts that are currently used, and
Mhm.
I couldn't tell from just the design of it, what should we expect, more, the same, or less water, and based on what?
Okay,
So I feel like that having that conversation with the engineer is appropriate.
okay, all right. That's fair enough. All right, so
So-
we will look at trying to get a meeting set up for that week of the 17th. Does that seem to work for you, Michael?
I'll be at a conference that week.
You'll be at a conference that week.
If we can get you guys.
Um,
Oh, I'm not saying-
Are you a commission of 5?
Yep.
So someone's not here that
Yeah.
could maybe be here.
Hal, what does your schedule look like? Are you available?
Yeah, I'm available whenever you want me.
I mean, the other possibility would be next week, if we did it sometime next week.
I'll
Is
be
that,
there.
They're available anytime.
that's
starting the
anytime
10th.
after the 10th, so,
So it'd be public notice, so you get, make sure the neighbors have opportunity to be here.
No, we don't have a public hearing for a final plat.
Oh, well,
So
But it-
we've made some obligation, I think, to inform the
Yeah.
neighbors on what's going on.
right.
Mhm.
But
it's
it
a
doesn't
public-
take as
public
long
meeting, which
Yeah, exactly, but.
we need to
Well,
make sure that's properly notified.
I think it's fair, if the neighbors have concerns to have them, have the opportunity to be here. But, it still gives, several days' notice.
Is there a date next week that works?
We don't need
So
to.
it doesn't have to be in the paper.
We're gonna tell them.
I just don't know where I'll be. Trying to get away, and I haven't been able to yet. But, so I just don't know. But
I'll be here next week.
do we, if we're going to be spread thin, if you're not here, do we want to talk about possibly getting another board member? I don't know that board member 5 has been here. Have they?
One time.
Once.
Okay, I didn't know. It wasn't one, I missed that one, so I don't know. But if I'm not here and you're not here, then we don't have quorum. Most likely.
I mean, I'll be here next week,
Okay,
but I won't be here the following week.
okay. So I think maybe if you can get it in there as quick as possible, at least we'll know he's gonna be here.
How about next Thursday?
Next Thursday at 4 o'clock?
Thursday at 4?
July
Thursday at 4? Okay,
What's the date on that?
13th.
I think I'm here.
What's that, what is the date of that?
13th.
July
13th.
13th, 4 PM.
Okay, so we're set then.
Cool.
Thank you all very much.
Mhm.
I have to talk to you a bit before. Are we done?
I think so.
I'll make a
Meeting is
motion to
adjourned.
adjourn.
Meeting's adjourned.
I need to go.